But just by following these simple Adobe Lightroom mobile photo editing techniques, you go from something that's just like a simple little snapshot you took on your iPhone to something that looks like a professionally taken and well-edited masterpiece. And now it's time to upload this baby to the gram. There we go. 3,000 liker. Ka-ching. What's up, YouTube? It's your boy, BMAC. So all the time I'm asked about my Instagram feed and my photography techniques to make my Instagram photos look the way that they do. And I'm always asked about how I'm able to achieve a look that closely links my photography skills with my cinematography skills like you see here on this channel, BMACadelic. Ever since uploading my how to edit photos in Lightroom like a pro video on this channel, you guys have loved that video, you've asked for more videos like it, and as a result, dozens of you have asked about how to edit photos in Lightroom like a pro on your phone. My iPhone is always with me, no exaggeration, probably like 99.999999999% of the time. And whenever I see a photography opportunity but don't have my Sony with me, I'm using my iPhone. These days, even just taking a snapshot with your cell phone can lead to some pretty impressive results because of how amazing these cameras built into these things actually are now. So today I thought I would walk you guys through my process for making your mobile photos look sexy while on the go with Adobe Lightroom Mobile. Adobe Lightroom Mobile is pretty much the same thing as Adobe Lightroom Desktop, maybe minus a few features here and there, but the Lightroom mobile app is constantly getting better and better, and more it's becoming my go-to photography editor while on the go when I want to edit photos on my cell phone. And while you're at it, if you have your phone right there next to you, head to Instagram, log on, go to @BMACadelic, or if you're on the desktop version of your web browser, open up a new tab, go to instagram.com/BMACadelic. That's where you'll see my Instagram feed, all the photos I edit, all my photography skills put into one place. Check it out, shoot me a follow if you feel so inclined. Now you can see some of the examples firsthand of how I'm taking photos and putting this app to good use. So let's fire up Adobe Lightroom Mobile on our phones. Get it? Because my photos are lit. Lightroom? Lit. Okay, just open up the app, open up Lightroom Mobile, and let's get started. All right, so here we are in Adobe Lightroom Mobile. First thing I'm gonna do is open up the photograph we're gonna be editing today. I took this on my iPhone 7 Plus. First thing you'll notice down here on the bottom, we have a lot of the same editing tools that we have in the desktop version of Lightroom. We have our exposure settings, our color settings, our effects, detail, all that right on the bottom toolbar here. But the very first thing I always do is start to adjust the exposure. So let's open up Light, which is the exposure settings. And the first thing I'll usually do is I'll just click Auto. Now, I rarely will leave these auto settings. There's always some adjustments I make myself that I think look better, but I do use these as a guide. So this is suggesting that I up the exposure a little bit, up the contrast a little bit. One thing I always do is bring down the highlights almost, all the way. Sometimes I won't go all the way, but as you can see from this photograph, by going down all the way and crushing those highlights, we get a lot more detail up here in the clouds that we otherwise would lose if we didn't have those highlights brought down. I'll also do that with the shadows. Usually for the shadows, I'll usually bring shadows up or down just until the darkest parts of the image are just barely losing detail. Now if we do a before and an after, already the image is just a little bit more brightened up, a little bit more lively. Looks good. Next thing I'll do is adjust the whites and the blacks. Now on the desktop version of Lightroom, usually you hold down the Option key on your keyboard and you start to drag the whites slider right here. And by doing that, you'll see the parts of your photograph that are a little bit too hot, where maybe you're getting blown out highlights. Little secret here, you could do that on the mobile version of Lightroom. You just start to slide the slider, and with a second finger, you put it anywhere on your photograph. And you'll see by doing that, all of a sudden we get the same kind of feature we had in the desktop version of Lightroom, where you can see what parts of your image are losing detail by adjusting the whites too much. So I'll adjust the whites until we just start to see a little bit of color there. That looks good. We'll do the same thing with the black. Start to drag, put my second finger on the screen, and drag to the left until we just start to see parts of the image that are losing detail in the blacks. Right about there looks good. That'll correct the tonal range. The next thing I'll do is go to the next tab over, Color, and this will adjust the white balance if you click Auto. Now usually will select the auto setting for white balance. It does a pretty good job of balancing the image out. One thing I will do is go down to Vibrance and usually uptick that just a little bit. That's a little too much. I'll go up to just below where it seems to be a little bit too unrealistic. I'll boost that vibrance, and usually I'll take down the saturation just a tad. Really what you're gonna do here is just do whatever looks best for you. Then you scroll up a little bit. Right here, if you click Mix, that's where you can get the HSL tab like you have in the desktop version of Lightroom. You can start to mess with your hues, make things look a little bit more interesting. I'll scroll this down, bring out a little bit of that nice little reddish hue in the clouds right there. Mess with the saturation as well. And of course the luminance. Now, if you go too far with the luminance, you're gonna have separation like that, which just looks very unnatural. So I usually keep that pretty close to the -15, +15 range, depending on the photograph and what I'm trying to achieve. Even that was a little too much. I'll probably just keep the luminance where it is. And I'll repeat this for every color throughout to really adjust the colors to make them look how I want. For the sake of time, I'm just gonna fast forward through that. Utilizing the HSL tab here can really help you come up with some cool color combinations and color effects. There we go, that's all set. Just by changing these HSL settings here for each color, we have something that looks pretty cool. Wow, already, look at that, it just like pops. Those cotton candy skies, baby. Before, after, now you can see the before and the after just by pressing and holding on your screen. Before, after, yeah, that looks pretty good. Next thing I'll do is I'll go over to effects. The clarity tool is definitely a tool you're gonna wanna check out. What it will do is actually accentuate the different edges within the photo and in the detail of the photo itself. It could give you an HDR looking effect. It could also make your edges and your objects pop a little bit. I will bump the clarity just a little bit like that. As with most of the sliders in Lightroom, you don't wanna overdo it. Now dehaze, you have to be careful with this tool. It's very powerful and it can make for some pretty cool effects, but it's very sensitive, so you don't wanna go too far or that happens. Looks like a nuclear bomb went off, actually. We do not want that. So I will bring that to the left or the right, depending. For this one, it's gonna be over like, what looks realistic? That looks a little bit too much. Probably around 4. That's enough to bring it a nice little accentuation on the colors there. And then vignette, I always give a vignette to my photos. As you guys know from the desktop tutorial using Lightroom desktop, I am not a fan of these white vignettes. I do not like the look of it. It looks very unnatural to me. I'll always use a black vignette. Go over to the left and I will do it just until you can't really tell there's a vignette, but it's there. And you could always adjust this by messing with the midpoint and the feather and all that, the roundness, and I will adjust these accordingly. And that's pretty much all I'll do for that. You could also get into split toning if you want. Now, I don't usually split tone my photographs. I focus on the HSL tabs, but you could add a nice little color to the highlights if you wanted to do something like a purple hue in the highlights and maybe a red in the shadows if you wanted to go for something like that. I think that's a little bit OD, so I'm gonna undo that. I'm gonna drag those down so we don't have any split toning going on. But just know you could use either a white vignette or a black vignette depending on your taste, and you can start to split tone to give your photo a really distinguished look. Now we're gonna go over to detail, and this is where you can control the sharpening of your photo. Now this is somewhat recent. This wasn't always here. These options for sharpening used to not be available in Lightroom Mobile, so it's super nice to have them now. These come in clutch to really make your photo look crisp and professional. Now these settings were already in here, but I'm gonna reset this, bring these down. Now usually for sharpening on an iPhone photograph, I'll go anywhere between 35 and 50. If we go too much, that just looks over sharpened and we get a lot of noise introduced once we do that. We could fix that in another couple steps when we go down to noise reduction. But generally for sharpening, I will keep it at around like 37, anywhere in there, because that seems to be the perfect balance of added sharpening without adding noise and without making things look too sharp, over sharpened, and somewhat unrealistic. You probably won't see a huge difference with this on YouTube because of YouTube's compression, but just mess with the sharpening a little bit until it looks good and it pops, make things look a little bit more crisp, and that's when you know you have the right setting for sharpening dialed in. Radius is also very important. You want to make sure you nail your radius, because otherwise you could have something that looks terrible when you've sharpened the image. Once again, you can start to slide the slider for radius, put your second finger on the screen, and this one takes a little bit of time to process. I don't know if that's just because of the app. It handles it pretty well, but anyway, the point is you want to zoom in. You want to zoom in on an area where you have edges that you can look at on the photograph, and you're going to want to slide the radius, hold down your second finger on the screen, and drag this to the left where you don't have that halo effect around objects in the photograph. If you have a halo effect around objects in your photograph, like if we bring this all the way up, we have some serious haloing going around. It just looks almost like HDR-ish. You don't want that. That means your radius setting is set too high. Usually, I'm at the lower end of this, and I will keep this probably around 1.1. I probably rarely go over 1.5 depending on the situation, but you want to have your radius setting so that your sharpening looks good. Detail, now you don't have to get too specific with this. You'll just notice that If you zoom in, put your second finger on the screen once again. As you go left and right, this is somewhat hard to see on mobile because of that refresh delay, but you can see that depending on which area on the slider you are for the detail setting, you could preserve some of the contrast in the details, the detail parts of your photo. I don't go too crazy with the setting. Usually I'll just leave it around like 20. If I happen to drag it all the way to the right by holding down my second finger and looking, there's not a huge difference. It's very hard to see on this screen. I'll usually just keep that anywhere between 25 and 50. We'll just go 30. Masking, now this one's important. You wanna drag this pretty much all the way to the right. Hold down that second finger on your screen again, and you're gonna wanna drag this to the left until you see the white outline of the parts of your image that you want sharpened. Now I'll go even further to the right here because I don't really want my cloud sharpened. We have some harsh edges in the cloud right there, as you can see. Right here, we have some edges. I don't really want that sharpened, so I'll keep going to the right until that's very faint. But everything else in the photograph over here, these rocks, you'll see by masking, those will be affected. Those edges will be sharpened. So for masking, drag it all the way to the right until you see the white outline only on the parts of your image that you want sharpened. That looks pretty good. I'm gonna keep it there. If you slide down, there are two other sliders that are very important. You have the noise reduction and color noise reduction. Even though the iPhone could take pretty good pictures, you are gonna have noise in the photograph itself, most likely. Even at ISO 20 here, we have a little bit of noise, considerable amount of noise in the clouds. So to fix that, you could adjust the noise reduction slider, which will slowly start to take away some of that noise. You do have to be careful not to slide this up too far, otherwise your photo is gonna end up looking like a watercolor painting. You're gonna lose the detail. So I'll usually have noise reduction at around 25, and then color noise reduction, I'll actually slide that one up pretty high because that'll do a really good job at taking away some of that noisiness in the clouds. Look at that, that's insane. All that noise that was in the clouds, it's gone. Likewise with the color noise reduction slider, you don't wanna slide that up too far or you could end up losing detail in your photo. I usually will keep that around 65%. That seems to be a nice balance between taking out the noise, but preserving the important detail in the rocks and whatever objects in the photo need that detail to make them really stand out. And then optics, this is where you can enable lens corrections. It's very subtle there, but when you enable that, it knows that this was taken on an iPhone, and Lightroom will apply a lens correction to take out some of the distortion from the iPhone lens. Every lens has a little bit of distortion usually. It's not that present here on the iPhone lens. I think this was the telephoto lens, if I'm not mistaken, on the 7 Plus. And by applying that, it just takes a little bit of that lens distortion out so it looks more realistic. And that's the basics. Those are the basic options on the bottom here. I'll just show you the before and the after. Hold down your finger on the screen. That's the before, after. Everything looks nice. It pops a little bit more. Those beautiful colors in this sunset are starting to pop. We get it on the water over here. We get it in the clouds. That's what I'm talking about, baby. That's 1,000 liker on the gram right there. Easily. Look at that color, look at that pop. All those different elements of the photograph in your editing come together to create a pretty impressive photograph that you took and edited right from your phone. And that is why I love Adobe Lightroom Mobile.
And that's basically it. That's how I make my photos taken with a cell phone look sexy with Adobe Lightroom Mobile. The funny thing is, sometimes it's actually super hard to see the difference between the photos I've taken with my Sony and with my iPhone. If you head to my Instagram page, at BMACdelic on Instagram, or just instagram.com/BMACdelic, I challenge you to try to comment on some of my photos you think were taken with my iPhone compared to my Sony. Spoiler alert, kind of hard to tell. But just by following these simple Adobe Lightroom Mobile photo editing techniques, you go from something that's just like a simple little snapshot you took on your iPhone to something that looks like a professionally taken and well-edited masterpiece. From here, all that's left to do is you just export this bad girl to your camera roll, from which point you could upload it directly to the gram, or you could put it through another photo editing app if you have one, another one you like to use. But no matter what you do with your photo, after you're done editing it in Adobe Lightroom Mobile, it will take your cell phone photographs to another level because of the professionalism that these editing techniques provide for you. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this photography editing tutorial helpful. If you did, smash that thumbs up button and subscribe for more tutorials like this one on this channel each and every Thursday. And I will see you guys on this channel tomorrow for a brand new cinematic vlog. And now it's time to upload this baby to the gram. There we go. 3,000 liker. Ka-ching.